Chapter 4. Jonathan found it difficult to concentrate on Michael's litany of complaints, having just come from a tense meeting with his father. The next time his sister requested a visit with him, perhaps he should refuse. Michael might adore David, but she whined endlessly about the burdens of David's responsibilities. Jonathan was thankful not to have a wife. How hard it must be for David to concentrate on Philistine threats when the most immediate threat was a tantrum in his own home. I wish he wasn't Israel's champion. If only he was an ordinary soldier, I'd be delighted, she grumbled. Jonathan knew better. At least then he could stay home a year. No one would miss him. Lounging, Jonathan considered her. You and David have had a month without interruption, long enough to conceive a child. Now the king wants him back on duty. Complaining won't alter the needs of the nation, Michael. Every time a village is raided, it's my husband who has to go out again. Why can't you be the one to go all the time? You have no wife. Jonathan would like nothing better, but the king often sent him on other errands, especially to speak for unity among the tribes. You should be proud of David. I am proud, but here it comes. You know the law better than anyone, Jonathan. Doesn't it say when a man takes his new wife, he isn't to go off with the army or be charged with any duty other than to give happiness to her? He smiled cynically. I'm delighted you're taking an interest in the law, though you have dubious motives. You cannot choose one law and ignore all the rest. Her eyes blazed. I'm not happy. It says I'm to have my husband long enough to be happy. How long would it take? You're a daughter of the king of Israel. Shouldn't you be thinking of what's best for our people? Chin tipping, she looked away. It's not fair. Is it fair the Philistines strip the poor of their sustenance? Of all our commanders, David has the most success against our enemies. The king is wise to use him. Or would you rather have the war come to our doorstep? David spoke from the doorway. Michael glanced up, blushing, embarrassed. She grew angry. You would think my father wanted you dead the number of times he sends you out. Jonathan rose in anger. Only a fool speaks such nonsense. A fool? She glared up at him. It's true, Jonathan. The only fool around here is be quiet, David said. You spend more time with my brother than you do with me. Red-faced, David came to her, drew her up, and led her aside. He kept his voice low as he leaned close and spoke to her. Any other man would have slapped her. Jonathan was pleased that his friend was forgiving. Hopefully, Michael would appreciate her husband's patience and compassion. Her shoulders slumped. She bowed her head. She sniffled and wiped her eyes. He tipped her chin, kissed her cheek, and spoke again, and she left the room. David faced Jonathan, clearly mortified by his wife's behavior. My servant will see her home. I'm sorry, Jonathan. She doesn't mean the thing she says. Why are you apologizing? My sister's the one who can't hold her tongue. She's my wife, Jonathan. A rebuke? David looked uncomfortable. Sit, relax, Jonathan smiled. It speaks well of you that you are protective of your wife. She is right about the law, my friend. It does call for the bridegroom's year at home to make a woman happy, and the way to do that is to fill her with child. Unfortunately, the king had no intention of following that particular law. He feared the Philistines more than God. I'm trying. Jonathan laughed. He rose and slapped David's back. Come, my friend, let's go look over the maps. They spent the next few hours in deliberation, discussing tactics and making plans. A servant came with refreshments. David tore a piece of bread and dipped it in his wine. Why haven't you taken a wife, Jonathan? From what Jonathan had seen of David and Michael's turbulent relationship, he was not eager to add a woman to his household. I have no time for a wife. You will need an heir, and a woman gives comfort to a man. Was Michael a comfort to David? Physically, perhaps, but what about a man's other needs? Peace and quiet and a place to rest from trouble. A contentious woman is worse than a bleeding goat outside the window. You like women? You like women, Jonathan grinned. Ah, but they do not dance and sing around me as they do you. They dance and sing around me because I'm one of them, a common man, a shepherd, youngest of my father's sons. But you, Jonathan, you stand as tall as your father, and from the gossip I hear, the women find you even more handsome. And you are the prince, heir to the throne of Israel. They wait at the gates and hope you will look at them. And when you do, they blush. You could have any woman you wanted, my friend. Jonathan knew women liked him, and he liked women. There is a time for all things, David. Right now, Israel is my beloved. The people are my wife. Perhaps when we have peace. It may be years before we have peace. The Lord said it's not good for a man to be alone. Jonathan sometimes longed for the comfort of home and family, but other matters must take precedence. When a man loves a woman, his heart is divided. Remember how Adam sought to please Eve when she offered him the apple? He knew the Lord forbade it and took the fruit anyway. He shook his head. No, Israel holds my heart. When God's enemies are driven from our land, then I will take a wife. He grinned, and I will stay home for a full year to make her happy. They met each day, going out into the field for a few hours of practice with their weapons. Jonathan cherished the time with his friend and knew David felt the same. Out in the open, beyond the gates and houses, they could talk as they shot arrows and threw spears while their young servants retrieved them. Even with your success, we're still far from winning the war, Jonathan sent his arrow winging to the target. The Philistines keep coming like waves from the sea. We have to stem the tide. And how do we do that? David hurled his spear farther than the last time and hit just off center. Philistine weaponry is far superior to ours. We strip the dead of their weapons. That's not enough, Jonathan shook his head. When those weapons are damaged, we don't know how to repair them. We can't forge swords like theirs, and their spear tips and arrows go through bronze. Took a handful of arrows from Ebenezer and dropped them into the quiver on his back. What's your idea? David hurled another spear. Find men willing to go to Gath. And trade for the secret? David asked. Jonathan shot another arrow straight to the target. The Philistines are too shrewd. They won't share their knowledge easily. Someone would have to go and gain their trust in order to learn how to make their weapons. A pity they know I'm the one who killed Goliath. You'd be the last one they'd welcome. What about those men who lived among them before Michmash? They returned to the ranks of Israel, but maybe a few of them would agree to go back, and I don't think they'd be trusted either. Would you trust a man whose loyalty was swayed whichever way the battle went? I don't trust them. Jonathan shot another arrow straight and true. Move the target back. It's too easy. He turned to David. The Lord could destroy all our enemies with one breath, David, but he told us to clear the land. I believe he did that to test our loyalty to him. Would we do as he said? Our forefathers did for a generation and then lost sight of the goal and of God. The servant called out that the target was ready, and Jonathan turned and shot his arrow. Dead center, the boy shouted and gave a whoop. Move it back again, Jonathan raised his bow. We must teach the people to pray and then fight, but it would also help if we had stronger swords. Jonathan and David went out together to hunt Philistine raiders. Camped beneath the stars, David picked up the strings of his harp, playing a song of celebration over their enemies. Why is it you never sing, Jonathan? Jonathan smirked. God gives each of us gifts, my friend. Singing isn't one the Lord saw fit to give me. Every man can sing. Sing with me, Jonathan. Some of the men joined him in urging the prince to give it a try. Laughing, Jonathan decided there was only one way to convince them. David's eyes flickered, but he said nothing. The other men sang louder, some grinning. When the song was over, Jonathan lay back and put his arms behind his head. David continued to play his harp, trying out the new chords and fingerings. The king will like that, Jonathan said. When they returned to Gibeah and dined with the king, Saul ordered David to sing for him. Sing a new song. The chamber filled with beautiful music as David strummed gently and plucked the instrument. Only he could bring sounds of such sweetness and words of grace. But when David started to sing, Jonathan grinned. Make a joyful noise, David grinned back at him before continuing. After several weeks of chasing Philistines and strengthening outposts, Jonathan returned to Gibeah to learn that David had routed another band of raiders and sent them running for their lives. His father summoned him. Jonathan expected to find the king well pleased. Instead, Saul paced, livid, while his advisors stood about watching uneasily. What had caused the foul mood this time? Nothing but good news had come from all the fronts, the most glorious from David's. Abner closed the door behind Jonathan. We're all here, my lord. Saul turned. I want David killed. Jonathan froze, staring. What madness was this? This Judean threatens my rule. Did you hear the people shouting his name yesterday when he approached the gates of my city? Jonathan shook his head, unable to understand his father's fury. Because he sent the enemy running? You understand nothing. You call my enemy your friend. Heat surged into Jonathan's face, his heart bounding in alarm and anger. David is your friend as well, my lord, and your son by marriage to Michal. Saul turned away from him. If we allow this shepherd to continue to gain power, he will assassinate me and take the crown for himself. Jonathan looked at others in the room. Would no one speak sense to the king? Abner returned his gaze, nodding. David could become a threat. Have you ever seen evidence of an insurrection? By the time there is evidence, I'll be dead, Saul raged. Jonathan extended his hands toward his father. You couldn't be more wrong about David. He has no ambitions other than to serve you. He steals the people's affection. The people love you. They cry out your name as well as David's, father, not as loudly and not as long. Jonathan glared at the others. Would they let suspicion grow in Saul because they were afraid to speak truth? David was Saul's greatest ally. Are the Philistines not enemy enough for you? We need not invent one in our midst. Abner spoke for the rest. An enemy in our midst can do the most damage. Jonathan knew he would have to find a way to speak to his father alone, for these men would say anything to please the king. They were too influenced by Saul's fears and unwittingly fanned the fire of his wounded pride by agreeing with him. But until he could draw Saul away from these men, Jonathan had to make certain David was removed from harm's way. He found David in a meeting with his officers. We must talk. Now. David led him to another room. What is it, Jonathan? What's wrong? My father is looking for a chance to kill you. David paled. Why? He's having one of his spells. You've seen it before. It will pass. I pray that you are right. Tomorrow morning, you must find a hiding place out in the fields. Jonathan took his arm and told him where to go. I'll ask my father to go out there with me, and I'll talk to him about you. And then I'll tell you everything I can find out. But you must take no chances, my friend. Some of the king's advisors see enemies where there are none. Jonathan joined his father before the morning meal. Saul looked exhausted and dark and drawn, and dark shadows beneath his eyes. When he reached for his goblet of wine, his hand trembled. He did not sleep well, and no wonder if all the king could think about was the rise of an adversary. Jonathan intended to clear his father's mind of those fears. Saul scowled. How could I sleep with my kingdom in jeopardy? Placing the bowl of honey close to Jonathan, tore off a hunk of bread and offered it to his father. Saul took it, still frowning, pensive. Men stood in the antechamber, waiting for an audience with the king. Jonathan needed his father away from the palace and out in the open air for a while. Remember how we cleared fields together, father? Saul made a soft sound, gazing off toward the windows. The fields are almost ready for reapers. The Lord has blessed us with a good harvest this year. He offered his father dates. It's been days since you left the palace and the company of his advisors. You'd work hard for other people, father. Surely you're allowed to walk in the fields of the Lord. Rising, Saul glowered at the men approaching. Go away! Servants backed away. Jonathan hadn't expected it to be so easy. They walked half the morning and sat beneath one of the olive trees. Saul sighed. I miss this. I would speak to you of your command yesterday, father. Which one? The one you issued to kill David. Saul turned his head and looked at him. Is that why you brought me out here? Yes and no. Which do you mean? I see how burdened you are. Not a week goes by that we must send men out to protect our land from the raiders, and the tribes constantly bicker among themselves over petty things. But remember, they all assemble at your command. Remember that, my lord. He looked to his father's eyes. You know I love you. You know I honor you. Do you trust me? Yes. The king must not sin against his servant David. He's never done anything to harm you. He's always helped you in any way he could. Have you forgotten about the time he risked his own life to kill the Philistine giant and how the Lord brought great victory to all Israel as a result? You were certainly happy about it then. Saul's shoulders slumped. No, I will never forget it. Why should you murder an innocent man like David? There's no reason for it at all. He spoke gently, wanting to remind his father of what was right, hoping to turn his mind from the advice of cowards. If there is any man in the kingdom you can trust more than me, it's your son-in-law David. Saul grimaced as if in pain. When I hear what he accomplishes, he shook his head. Everything David has accomplished is for the Lord's glory and yours, Father. He is your faithful servant. Jonathan wanted to speak more of David's achievements, but worried they would distress rather than comfort his father. With all due respect for your advisors, Father, they are frightened men. Let wisdom rather than fear reign over Israel. Leaning his head back against the gnarled trunk of the olive tree, Saul closed his eyes and sighed. Jonathan remained silent. He did not want to press his father as other men did. He looked out over the fields and then up at the blue heavens. You are my eldest son, Jonathan, and the first show of my strength as a man. The people hold you in high regard. When I die, the crown will pass to you. God willing. When Saul glanced at him, Jonathan felt his heart flip. He had not meant to remind his father of what Samuel had said. I wonder what God was thinking when he chose me to be king. Jonathan relaxed. That you were the man the people wanted. Yes, such bleakness. The people wanted me once. They still do. You need not worry, Father. Lord, let him hear my words. The people will always love a king who reigns with wisdom and honor. Their love is like the wind, Jonathan, blowing east one day and west the next. Then you must steady them with a calm spirit. I'm tired. Rest a while now. I'll keep watch. And Saul did. He slept several hours while Jonathan remained with him in the olive grove. When servants came to check on the king, Jonathan motioned them away. Every man needed a rest, especially a king. When his father awakened, he smiled. I dreamed I was a farmer again. The Lord has called you to another purpose. His father started to rise. Jonathan got to his feet and extended his hand. Saul clasped it and pulled himself up. You're not a boy anymore, he smiled slightly. I keep forgetting. He put his hand on Jonathan's shoulder. As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be killed. Jonathan bowed low. May the Lord reward your wisdom, Father. We can hope so. Saul saw his servants coming. I have things to do. He walked toward them. Jonathan went out further into the fields. David! I'm here. David came out of hiding and walked toward him. It hurt Jonathan to see his friend so tentative. He smiled when he came closer. I can see by your face you believe things went well with the king. Jonathan put his arm around his friend's shoulders. There's no need for you to look uncertain, my friend. He released him. Come, I will take you to him. You will see for yourself that things will be as they were before. Bring your harp. Things were indeed better between the king and his champion. Jonathan saw the peace David brought the king with his songs of deliverance. For a time, the Philistines were quiet, and Gibeah basked in the sun. Jonathan would look back on those days as the most peaceful he had ever known. He and David spent long hours together poring over the law, discussing it. No one else among their friends and relatives shared their fascination. Until I faced Goliath, my brothers thought I was fit only to watch sheep. No matter what I said, they accused me of something. That day in the valley of Elah, Eliab said I was conceited and wicked for speaking out. They didn't know you very well. I wonder if they ever will. An expression flickered across David's face and was gone. A grimness Jonathan had not seen before. Jonathan lifted a jug of fresh water and filled his goblet. How wonderful and pleasant it would be if all brothers could live together in harmony. He drank deeply and set his cup aside. That's my one dream, David. The work I believe God intends for me, to help my father bring the tribes together. We cannot be scattered flocks bleeding at one another. If we're to conquer our enemies, we must unite with our brothers and stand firm behind God's anointed king. We must remember our covenant with the Lord, for that covenant with God is what will hold us together. You are blessed, David smiled. You have a copy of the law with you wherever you go. If only his father, the king, had made a copy of the law for himself. If only Saul had taken the command seriously, perhaps he would not have sinned. And if his father had studied the law, he would know that the Lord was slow to anger and quick to forgive. How many days God gives me on this earth, David? It will not be enough to know all that he has for us in the law. It is new every morning that I read it. I wish the Lord in his mercy would write it upon our hearts, for it seems to me our minds are not able to absorb the length and depths of the love that God has for us, his chosen people. Yet again, Saul sent David out to fight, and he struck the Philistines with such force they fled before him. He returned in triumph, and the city and the countryside celebrated. The king and his officers, David and Jonathan among them, feasted in the palace. Outside, warriors sang songs of victory written by David. Many of the officers drank heavily. Sing us a song, David. Yes, sing us a song. David looked at King Saul. Jonathan felt the air growing thinner. He waited for his father to speak, wondering why he sat with his back against the wall, a spear in his hand, daydreaming. Father? Yes, Saul waved his hand. Sing. David's servant brought him the harp. As the chamber was filled with his playing, one of his advisors remarked, he casts spells with his music. Saul's gaze shifted. Jonathan glared at the man. I believe you have duties elsewhere. The advisor glanced at the king, but Saul said nothing. Jonathan did not take his gaze from the man until he excused himself, rose, and left the room. Relaxing back onto the cushions, Jonathan listened to David singing. Give to the Lord the glory he deserves. Bring your offering and come into his courts. Worship the Lord in all his holy splendor. Let the earth tremble before him. Men clapped when he plucked the last chords. The king smiled and nodded. A servant went close to Jonathan. Your mother requests your presence, my lord prince. Surprised, Jonathan asked his father's permission to leave. It was not his mother's custom to ask for him. Go, Saul barely glanced at him, his gaze still fixed upon David as he began to play another song. Jonathan's mother had lavish quarters now, and servants to wait upon her every need. When he entered, a pretty servant girl bowed before him and ushered him to his mother's chamber. She was reclining on a couch, cheeks sallow. I'm sorry to take you away from your celebration, my son. You're ill, Jonathan said, alarmed. Why wasn't I told? I'm not so ill that anyone should know. Bring my son a cushion, Rachel. Jonathan sat and took his mother's hand. What did the physicians say? His mother patted his hand as if he were a child. The physicians know nothing. I just need rest. Jonathan, I would like you to meet Rachel, daughter of my second cousin. Her father is a scribe. Jonathan glanced at the blushing girl. She was very pretty. His mother nodded, and the girl slipped from the room. She's pretty, don't you think? And she comes from a good family. When his mother struggled to sit up, Jonathan got up to help her. I'm comfortable now. Sit. She smiled. Rachel's father knows Samuel. You asked to see me. Why? I should think it's obvious, she pressed her lips together. You should marry my son, and soon. This is not the time. What better time is there? You're far older than your father was when we married. Mother, my responsibilities leave me no time for... David is married. You pressed for the match, didn't you? And he's younger than you are. Amused, Jonathan shook his head. I suppose every mother wants her children settled. He leaned toward her, wanting her to rest and not worry. David's marriage to Michal strengthens the bond between our tribe and Judah, mother. And besides, what better man could there be for your daughter than Israel's champion? Her eyes darkened. You are Israel's champion, my son. You were scarcely older than David when you routed the Philistines at Michmash. Though many years have passed since then, the people have not forgotten. There are equally good reasons for you to marry Jonathan. He felt the tremor in her hand. Why are you pressing this, mother? Her eyes welled with tears. Because I don't know from one battle to the next if my son will be killed. Her voice broke. Is it too much to ask that I hold a grandchild in my arms? Michal and David, no! He frowned, troubled by her vehemence. She sat up and leaned toward him. Marry and have sons of your own, Jonathan. You and your brothers must have sons to build up Saul's house. Why are you so adamant now? We must increase in numbers. You have more faith in me than I have in myself if you think I can increase the population. It is not a laughing matter. He sighed. No, but it's not the right time either. No, mother. If it pleases the king for you to marry, if it were on his mind, he would have suggested it himself. And if he does now, I'll tell him his wife has put him up to it. Jonathan kissed her on the cheek and rose. You and David. Her head came up. What about David? He agrees with you. He told me the scriptures say it's not good for a man to be alone, that he should have a wife. He tilted his head at her expression. Why does that surprise you? If you won't listen to your mother, perhaps you should listen to your friend. Later, perhaps.